Hi, I'm Tom Collins, Executive Director of the Arizona Citizens Clean Elections Commission, and I'm here today with Beth Lewallen, who heads the consulting firm Italicized Consulting and is a longtime state and county advisor to policy leaders here in Arizona. We're here today to talk about the state budget and how it impacts all kinds of things, including our upcoming election. So Beth, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time. We at Clean Elections recently did a survey of voters around the state, different regions, different parties, to identify some of the issues they want to hear more from candidates about. And of course, probably not surprising, the top issues included things like healthcare and education and the economy. All things that I think we'll find out, and I think you may tell us, are wrapped up in the state budget process. So right now, the legislature's in session, and we have a state budget process sort of happening. What are the things that voters need to know about the state budget right now?
I think the thing that they need to know is that there's a lot of money to spend this year, which is not always the case. I think they need to know that the process is ongoing and there's an opportunity to be involved in the discussion. And I think they need to know that the best way to be involved in any budget discussion is to show up and vote when it's time to choose the candidates who will shape those budgets.
Sure. So right now you said there's a lot of money to spend. So and what that means is I think there's somewhere around $500 million surplus. What are the kinds of decisions that legislators are going to have to make about those dollars?
Yeah, the surplus actually right now appears to be about $5.3 billion. So it really is, numbers I've never seen before watching the state budget. I think the thing that they really need to understand is that that's not all ongoing. And you'll hear that a lot in budget discussions, that a lot of it is just this year, for a variety of economic reasons. It's there to be used one time for investments, tax cuts, things, and then the rest, can be used for ongoing priorities.
Sure. Have legislators started to articulate what their priorities are for this? And I apologize, I misspoke by an order of magnitude there. Have they started to identify what their priorities are for those dollars?
They have, and this is a way that voters can be involved, throughout the legislative session. The appropriations committees in the House and Senate consider bills that lawmakers introduce for specific funding priorities. So we've seen bills, from just $100,000 for one priority, $1 million here, to hundreds of millions of dollars for public safety, pension funds, and road building maintenance exercises. And so throughout the legislative process, we've seen those proposals as lawmakers are kind of, putting a stake in the ground of these are the priorities I want to see for funding in the state budget. Those move through the legislative process. A lot of the priorities they don't articulate in public. They have private conversations with the leadership teams at the House and Senate and can kind of say, here's what I'd really like to see in the budget in order to vote for it. And so, I think the good news about being involved in the state budget is really it's never too early or too late to be involved, because every year they have to go through this process. And it's a long, drawn-out process. Long before the public sees an actual budget proposal, the economists have been working on it. Lawmakers have been identifying what they want in the budget, and negotiations have been happening behind the scenes. So it's never too late to let your lawmakers or your candidates know what you think the state priorities should be for the funding.
So just really quickly, I think that, just to sort of recap what has happened so far and what happens every session, the governor comes out with a budget blueprint sometime in January. The legislature usually comes out with one, is that right, of their own sometime that month? And that's where the jumping off point is for those discussions?
That's correct, yeah. In the fall, the state agencies submit their budget request to the governor's office. And so that kind of starts the process of, here's what we'd like, here's what we need. In January, the first week of the legislative session, the governor issues a full budget proposal with the details of what he or she wants in the legislatively enacted budget. In January, the legislature issues what's called a baseline budget, which is just a continuation of last year's spending. It doesn't include what lawmakers want as their new priorities for new spending, but it is, just an explanation of here's the caseload growth, here are the number of students that will impact education funding, here are the healthcare enrollment that will change the funding for those programs. And so January really is the public launching point of the budget proposals and the budget discussions. And that's when that appropriations committee process starts as well.
So voters in our survey identified a couple of specific issues that they wanted that they want to hear more from candidates about. I'm going to go through just a couple of those. One of them on the environment was water conservation. Is that something that the state budget can affect?
It certainly is. Every year there's some discussion about water. This year, much more so because Governor Ducey did include goals for big water investments and, kind of left the details to be discussed throughout the legislative process. So that has been happening. Certainly, it takes money for any water priority. And so you see a lot of times, a conversation between legislators from the urban parts of the state and the rural parts of the state who have different perspectives on what that might look like, how those investments might happen. But absolutely, that is a question of how state dollars are invested in Arizona's water future.
And then another issue that came up, obviously, is the issue of education. And one of the issues that we saw there is from voters to identify an issue within that subject was teacher pay. Is that something that that this budget will deal with, and is that an ongoing issue for voters, lawmakers, and everybody?
Yes to both. It absolutely is an ongoing issue. Education is a top part of any budget discussion every year, and definitely something where we've seen public involvement shape the discussion and the dynamics politically at the Capitol. It's not, it's always at the top of the list, teacher pay in the discussions. It's not as prominently so as it has been in past years where you saw, the 20 by 2020 plan where it was specifically focused on teacher pay. A lot of the conversations this year are on the broader education funding mechanisms of how we get money in the classrooms and how we prioritize and who controls those dollars.
I mean, that's just a real quick follow-up on that. I mean, that is an issue that's ongoing, right? Arizona has a very big in school choice, right? We have a much more diverse K-12 system in terms of the form of education, the form of a school, the form of school administration than maybe other states do. Those are things that factor in when lawmakers are discussing those formulas, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, every year you have conversations about those specific programs as well as the general education funding. And so definitely a way to be involved in shaping the outcomes of those, whether it's empowerment scholarship accounts or funding for, public schools. And yeah, it's definitely a factor throughout every budget conversation.
Well, thank you, Beth, for all those insights. And I think you made a very good point, which is that folks can get involved in this process now, and it will be an issue going forward in the election. And with respect to that, we encourage everybody to check out our website where you can read our survey results, find out what voters like you are saying about the issues they want to hear about. You can find out all kinds of information about candidates, how to participate in elections, and you can leave a question for the moderators of our ongoing debate series. So that's azcleanelection.gov. Beth Lewallen is online. You can go to Italicized Consulting. She's a great resource and has created a great resource for all kinds of information on the budget, ongoing negotiations, new numbers, everything you really want. Thank you, Beth, for being here. And folks, you can check out, like I said, all the information on candidates and the election on our website, azcleanelections.gov.